From the sounds you hear on a late-night drive, from the cracks in the walls speaking to you in the dead of night, from the spaces in between. This is Dusklight Radio, hosted by yours truly, Everett J. Blackwell. The sun has set and dusk has crawled into the studio once more. Whether you're working, prepping to sleep, or evading the formless void that will one day consume us all, Blackwell is here to soothe your ears and captivate your soul. Now, close your eyes and take a deep breath. The scene has been set and the light is on. It's time to walk towards it. I'd heard about this mammal that lived deep in Siberia. Legends said that it was a nocturnal creature that fed on the blood of women and children. In medieval times, this beast would cull through villages, sucking the life out of every household. Imagine that, going to bed one night, then waking up to discover that your entire village was gone. I'd heard stories from my grandmother while growing up. Her parents had emigrated from Russia in the 1920s and set up a new life in the United States. As a child, I used to watch her warm pelmeni on the stove and smell the heavy aroma as she cooked.
This is my special recipe. Eat it up, or the Vokalak will get you.
The Vokalak? That's what she called it. The creature was a popular myth among Slavic people. She used these stories as a means to persuade me, to get me to brush my teeth, to make sure I did well in school, and to compel me to do my chores.
Clean your room, or the Vokalak will get you.
But what was the Vokalak? According to my grandmother, it was neither wolf nor bear, but something much, much worse. The older I got, the more disturbing her tales became.
I'm going to tell you a story. Everyone in our family knows it. It is a part of our Russian heritage.
What is it? I asked, pulling my blanket over my knees.
It is a great evil,
she said, yanking her sleeve back to reveal a marking on her arm. A cross.
It has existed for thousands of years. We were told as children never to stay out past dark. If we did, the Vokalak would get us.
I sat with my back against the pillows, my eyes wide as snow globes.
Those who didn't have God's protection were vulnerable to its attacks. Mothers would protect their homes by sprinkling salt around the doors at night. Anyone who stepped outside that protected boundary would be hunted.
My grandmother took a deep breath, paralyzed by fear.
Eventually, the protection tactics didn't work. The Vokalak got smart, figured out ways to sneak past the salt rings. That's why your great-grandmother came here, to escape. She was lucky.
It seemed like the perfect old wives' tale to keep children obedient. Even though these stories terrified me, I kept them close to my heart. I took them with me into high school and university, and eventually into my career as a wildlife photographer. I should mention here that growing up, I'd always loved taking pictures of animals. There was something about capturing them in a raw state that fascinated me. Eventually, a picture of a grizzly bear I'd taken in Alaska went viral on my social media. A national newspaper spotted my work and commissioned me to do a series for them. My career took off from there. Several years into my dream job, the senior editor of a magazine called me and said,
"I want you to find something new. A creature that no one has seen."
I thought about the first story that had ever intrigued me, the Vokalak. But was it real? If I could prove that it existed, it'd be the biggest story since Sasquatch. I've got an idea, but it'll take me all the way to Siberia, and it could end up being a ghost story.
Ghosts are fine. If you don't find your creature, take some pictures of wolves. Wolves always do well.
Through a local news connection in Siberia, I organized the entire thing. The plan was to stay with a hermit, Yuri, who lived deep in the forest about 3 hours from the nearest town. He was isolated and eccentric, but he had claimed to have seen the beast. The problem was that it was so cold at night, we'd have to keep a fire going just to keep ourselves from freezing. Another issue was that Yuri barely spoke English. I'd have to communicate in Russian to have any chance of understanding him. Thankfully, I'd grown up with enough understanding from my grandmother to get by. She had been fluent and had taught me enough to make out most conversations. With her training, I should be fine. I landed in the city of and made my way to the small town where I'd meet up with Yuri. I rented an old Buick from a couple who owned a grocery store and wound my way through the maze of frozen country roads. It was already so much colder than usual by the time I reached the village.
Yuri is over there,
the barkeeper said and pointed to the back of the tavern. I glanced at the fireplace and saw an ancient man reclining in a seat. He seemed so tired and drained of life. His skin was leathery from years in the sun. His beard was wide and nearly down to his stomach. He appeared older than most books in the library. "Evening, sir," I said and extended my hand. "My name is Max. I'm the one you spoke with via the letter." Yuri just motioned to the seat across from him. I took it and warmed my ice-cold fingertips at the fire.
"Are you sure you want to do this?"
he asked. "Yes, I've heard the legends my entire life. I want to see if they're real."
"Be careful what you wish for,"
he said with a hint of sarcasm.
"You may find out more than you bargained for." "Did your grandmother tell you these stories?"
"Yes," he smiled.
"As they always do."
Yuri pushed himself up and stretched, the stiffness in his bones creaking like branches in the wind.
"All right, city friend, come with me. I'll show you my cabin and prepare you to meet the creature. But pray it stays hidden. The Vokalak does not take kindly to strangers."
I followed Yuri outside and expected to see some sort of vehicle waiting. Instead, all he had was a sleigh. It was the kind you'd grip by two poles and pull it along behind you. In its body was a stack of supplies: oil, blankets, food, and water. "We must leave now," he said, and motioned to the woods. "Otherwise it'll be too cold. We need to be inside by the fire when night comes." I tossed my gear in the back and began our journey. During our hike, I was surprised at how strong Yuri was. He never once took a break as we ventured through the snowy forest. The sleigh must have weighed 80 pounds, I thought, as we hiked along. Yuri tugged it with ease, always keeping his eyes ahead as we went further in. We continued slowly through the terrain, feeling the ice-cold temperatures bite into our skin. I drank hot water from my canteen and thanked God that I'd brought more than enough. We eventually made it to Yuri's cottage. I was surprised to see how small it really was. It was no bigger than the average studio apartment. In the center of the space was a roaring fire. Beside that were two cots, one for Yuri and one for me. In the corner was a tiny steel oven. There were two burners on top with enough room for two pots. Hanging from the rafters was an assortment of metal utensils and dishes. "Make yourself at home," Yuri said, and looked out the window at his sleigh. It was the first time he'd taken a break. I was impressed. This man couldn't have been less than 70 years old, and yet here he was, out hiking me and making me seem like an out-of-shape city dweller. I'd stopped multiple times along the way to catch my breath, then hurried to catch up with his unending pace. It made me realize how soft our city lives had made us. I got unpacked and settled into my new home. Yuri had the fire roaring as soon as we'd entered. We needed to keep one burning at all times to survive. In the Siberian wilderness, without insulation and electricity, temperatures dropped to astonishing levels.
"You always keep the fire going at night. Otherwise, you freeze."
I asked Yuri if he would take me to the spot where he'd last seen the Vokalak.
"Yes,"
he said, wringing his hands with concern.
"But please do not say its name. It is bad luck."
"I apologize." I set my backpack down on my bed next to the camera gear. "I'm just excited is all." We got ready for a short night's sleep. There wasn't a bath or shower, so I wiped myself down with a wet towel and climbed into the empty cot next to Yuri's. It was so cold. I couldn't believe how freezing it was. If you pulled off your blankets and stepped just inches away from the fire, you felt the air penetrate your skin, like your insides were freezing slowly. I sank into my mattress and covered myself with my blankets and closed my eyes. That night I had a strange, horrific dream. In it, a slender, emaciated figure crept into our cottage while we slept. The intruder crawled toward my bed, then pushed my head aside and exposed my neck. My arms twitched as it started to feed. Razor-sharp fangs dug into my arteries and drained my blood. When I woke up the next morning, my head throbbed. I was exhausted and starving, like I hadn't eaten in days. It was still dark out, and Yuri was casting a log onto the fire and preparing tea on the stove.
You slept in late. If we are going to reach the cave, we must leave soon.
I'll be ready. I sat up and gasped as my head pounded. I must be dehydrated. I grabbed the canteen beside my head and took another swig. The sun was out as Yuri and I made our way from the cottage. We were going on an hour's hike deep into the woods. It was the last place he'd claimed to have seen the creature.
It sleeps during the day, so if you can find its resting place, you can easily document it.
He led me through a long trek, across a frozen river surrounded by berries and other beautiful Arctic plants. I was amazed at the serenity of the place. It was so silent, so untouched by man. At one point, we came across an ancient hunting shack. Its roof was worn and dilapidated. A snow owl perched on its roof and watched us mysteriously. The creature seemed to hold a world of stories unto itself. I wanted to ask Yuri if the shack was his, but he seemed so focused on his path, so I kept silent and continued following him through the snow, doing my best to keep up with his vibrant steps. We eventually found the mouth of an isolated cave. Worn, rotten boards covered most of its opening. It looked like the remnants of a mine that had been forgotten long ago.
It's in there, but you must be quiet. If you disturb its sleep, the creature will devour you.
I nodded and quickly removed my camera. I set it carefully on my lap, twisted off the cap, and mounted the lens. For this dark interior, I'd selected my Canon R6 with an RF 70 to 200mm lens. I had no idea how tight the spaces were inside, or even if the lighting would work. To get viable images, I decided on my Godox X Pro 2 wireless flash trigger and a Godox V8603 off-camera speedlight. I'd mount my flash device on a stalactite or rocky ledge with a super clamp for proper lighting. Without this preparation, the cavern would be so dark that I couldn't see a thing.
Pretty toys, Yuri said as he watched me assemble my gear. You city folk love your toys.
I stepped into the cave, but all I could find were the remnants of a fire, a few empty bottles of liquor, and a chasm stretching deep into the darkness. I tried staring down into the pit with my flashlight, but I was surprised to see that there was no end in sight. How far does it go? I wondered. There's no way I can make it down there. I wandered back to the cave's entrance and found Yuri laughing hysterically. What's so funny?
You went into that cave and didn't find the monster.
You told me this is where you'd seen the creature. Yuri just sat there next to his newly made fire, cackling, his face puffy and red from tears. Why are you laughing, Yuri?
Because you're so desperate,
he said, trying to contain himself.
You travelers come from all over the world begging to see this creature.
I let the camera hang from my neck, irritated at the thought of the senile hermit scamming me. You told me in your letter that you'd seen it.
In my dreams, city friend.
You think that if there were some monster out here, I would have seen it. I have lived in these woods for 40 years. As soon as he said those last words, a disturbing, exaggerated breath emerged from the cave. It sounded like the long exhale of a terminally ill patient breathing their last. It seemed to go on forever. Yuri and I stared at the subterranean opening, expressions of fear etched onto our faces. The drawn-out breath continued for several seconds, then went silent. Yuri? What was that? He stood there for a long time, listening. We must go, he said and grabbed my arm, pulling me back towards the trail. Just let me assemble my gear. I knelt and started to pack. You don't have time. But my camera is finished packing on the hike. Do you want to leave? We leave now. We made it back to Yuri's cottage just before nightfall. After a simple dinner of boiled potatoes, jerky, and tea, we settled down for an eerie night. You seem scared out there, I said to Yuri, watching his hands shake while he ate his dinner. It was just the wind. You made a big deal out of all this being fake, and yet what? As soon as you heard that noise, you panicked. It doesn't matter. Of course it does. It was just a bear. We had interrupted its hibernation. Why do I get this feeling that you're lying to me? I got up and stood inches from his face. Yuri finished his meal and looked away, his face betraying more emotion than usual. I could tell he wanted to say something, but it was bothering him. But what? I'm sorry, said the friend. He got up and set his plate in the wooden sink. It is true that I have lived out here for many years. I have seen all sorts of strange things, but this, he shook his head, is beyond anything I can comprehend. For the first time in my life, I want to leave. Why don't you? Because he looked down, tucked his chin against his chest, and took a deep breath. It wants me to stay. What does? The heavy crack of footfalls in the snow alerted us to the window. Next, the shuffling creak of tree branches being brushed by something lumbering through the woods. Yuri slowly made his way to the window. We must be quiet, he whispered, then cracked open the boards to look out. After panning his gaze, he closed the window. What is it? Is it the Vokalak? No, he said, shaking his head. It is just a deer. He sat back down in the bed. After a few seconds of uncomfortable silence, I whispered, Yuri, I really want to see it. You will, he said, then raised his hand as a man does when trying to calm an opponent. I know the place where it will be. In the morning, I will take you. That night, I waited until the fire was roaring, then slipped into bed. I could hear Yuri talking to himself, like he was arguing with someone. I wondered what he could be yapping about. I got up, pried open my backpack, and brought out a tub of salt that I had brought from home. I wasn't superstitious, but I'd always remembered those stories my grandmother told me. I'd recounted those mothers in the isolated villages who protected their loved ones with rings of salt. Just to be safe, I thought. I'll put some around my bed while I sleep. I waited until Yuri nodded off, then sprinkled a protective circle around my bed. I made sure it was wide enough but discreet enough to be inconspicuous. After all, I didn't want to disturb Yuri and give him another reason to tease me. Once I was sure my circle was complete, I sank back down into my bed and fell asleep. The dreams that I had that night were as disturbing as before. During my sleep, the same emaciated creature crept inside our cabin and found Yuri and me resting deeply in our cots. The monster crawled toward me and licked its lips while gazing over my ivory neck. But this time, when it reached down to remove my blankets, it pulled back with a frightened groan. There at its feet was the ring of salt I had placed around my bed. At first, the creature recoiled at its sight, but then, to my horror, it grabbed a stick from the fire and brushed it against the circle, creating a slight opening in the protective ring. In fluid, quick motions, it continued brushing the salt aside until it made an opening wide enough for it to slip through, untouched. The creature grabbed my head and tipped it aside and started to feed. I could hear loud and desperate sucking sounds as it drank. The next morning, Yuri was up, shuffling about and warming tea on the stove. Once again, my head throbbed and a queasy feeling overcame me. I feel sick. I thought, cradling my head and thinking back to the dream. That strange, nocturnal creature had returned for me, and the way it had siphoned my blood. My fingers traced a nervous line across my neck, and I noticed a sore spot just beneath my jaw. "Yuri," I said, sitting up, "do you have a mirror?" "No," he said, his back turned towards me. "Mirrors are not allowed in here." I threw off the covers and looked at the floor. There was a thick opening in the salt circle I had put around the cot. I couldn't believe it was broken. "We must go," Yuri said, without turning, "or we won't see the creature." Give me a second." I sat on the edge of my bed, feeling like I was going to vomit. I searched for the salt container in my luggage, but I couldn't find it. Where's my salt tub? I scrambled through my gear, but I couldn't locate it. "Yuri," I asked, my voice dry and groggy, "I can't find my salt anywhere. Have you seen it?" "What salt?" he said, offering me a steaming cup of tea. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do." I motioned to the broken ring. "The salt I used to make this." He glanced down at the circle and shrugged as if to say, "So what?" He returned to the oven and started pouring more tea. "Would you like honey in your drink?" "No, Yuri, I want to know where my salt is." Just then, a vision flashed in my mind. It was the nocturnal creature, wandering its way through the snow, dragging a heavily laden potato sack behind it. When it reached its cave, it tossed the bag inside. There was my salt container, thudding against the walls of the earth. "What is it?" Yuri said with concern, noting my blank stare. My vision had ended. I was back in the cabin as confused as ever. "Forget it," I said. I just stood there, uncertain, focusing on the sore marking on my neck. I wondered why these visions were happening and if there was any chance that they were real. It was almost noon by the time we made it out of the cabin. I felt exhausted and devoid of all strength. I didn't want to go anywhere, but I had to get my picture. I had to finish my assignment. All the energy I had spent in coming here had possessed me. I needed to see this job through, prove to myself and the world the Volkolak was real. I fought sickness and fatigue as we hiked. It was like I hadn't slept in days. It made it hard to even stay awake. "This way, city friend," Yuri said, leading me through the snow. This time he was so far ahead of me I could barely see him. "Honestly," I mumbled, bumbling my way after him, "I don't think I want to be here anymore." I felt the scab along my neck and started picking at it. "Yuri," I asked, trying to recover my breath, "do you have bedbugs out here?" "No," his voice responded, laughing as if I'd told a joke. "No bedbugs. Too cold." "Then what did this?" I shouted, touching my neck. "Something bit me last night. I keep having these strange dreams." "So do I," Yuri called back. He was up ahead of me now, so far that I couldn't even see him. "Dreams of a beautiful woman joining me in bed." "No! Listen to me!" I shouted and stopped, staring deep into the forest. "Don't lie to me! I put salt around my bed last night and this morning I noticed something had broken it. What are you not telling me?" Yuri's voice was quiet now. Then it rose, sounding much closer than before. "I can see that this snow is getting to you." "It's not the snow! You're hiding something!" Yuri's laughter seemed distant now. Then, to the right of me, I was surprised at how far off his voice sounded. It was like he was in two places at once. "You really want to know?" His voice trailed, a new hostility there. "You came all this way to find your monster. Did you ever think that it was the one who brought you here?" "The Volkolak?" Yuri appeared from the trees, wearing a mischievous smile. "Yes. You're not the first to come looking for it." He stepped toward me and I backed away, disturbed by his menacing stare. "I'm calling off this assignment." My voice shook, trapped in my tightening throat. "I want to go back." "Go where?" Yuri scoffed as if offended by my remark. "There is nowhere to go." "I'm returning to the village." I spun on my heel and headed back in the direction of the cabin.
It is too cold to leave now. You are in no condition to hike. You will have to spend another night in my cabin.
Another night? The very thought of spending another evening in that prison made me want to vomit. By the time we had reached Yuri's cottage, I was devoid of all strength. The day's hike had completely sapped my energy. I slouched by the fire as Yuri boiled more tea on the stove.
Here, city friend. Drink this. It will give you strength.
I don't want it.
Take it.
He set the mug in my hands.
Take it.
He set the mug in my hands.
If you refuse, you will have no energy to make it to the village tomorrow.
I numbly took the cup and brought it to my lips. Yuri watched me as I drank, then turned back toward the oven. As soon as his gaze left me, I cracked a weary smile. Yuri hadn't realized that I'd faked sipping his concoction. I spat its contents into the mug and poured it out behind my bed.
Now,
Yuri said, moving to the edge of his bed, facing me.
What will you tell your employers, since you have not photographed the beast?
I'll think of something. My eyes drifted to the camera bag next to my cot. I had to leave it there close to the fire with all of my valuables to keep warm. Otherwise, it'd freeze.
If I could make a suggestion, maybe we could find a moose. You take some pictures, do tricks with your editing software, make it look like a monster.
That's a great idea, I said, trying to stay awake.
You seem tired. Why don't you get some sleep?
All right, Yuri. I leaned back in my bed and pulled the blankets over my body. I'll see you in the morning. They say you can't get out of a cat-and-mouse situation until you realize who the cat is. If you're the mouse, you have to think of ways to outsmart the predator. Well, that's exactly what I did. In addition to pretending that I'd drunk Yuri's concoction, I'd snuck my camera and speed light out while he was gathering wood. I'd concealed both under my blankets before he came back in. Plus, I'd also pretended to be more tired than I was. I'd figured Yuri was hiding something from me the moment we'd met. My grandmother had always told me, trust no one, Max. Use your brains to outsmart those who would hurt you. Grandmother had a knack for identifying dishonest people, and so did I. By the time I'd pretended to fall asleep, Yuri was out cold, snoring like a man who had downed one too many drinks. The fire crackled as the frozen wilderness grew quiet around me. The night seemed to go on forever. I cracked open my eyes and wondered how long I could pretend to be asleep before actual exhaustion overtook me. Then, at some point, perhaps an hour later, I heard a loud creak from the other end of the cabin. Yuri was awake, speaking softly at the door. He seemed preoccupied with something, nervously wringing his hands as he cracked it open. I couldn't see from my angle, but I could tell that a tall and lumbering figure was outside, and it was breathing heavily. Yuri never looked up as he spoke to it.
You must hurry, he whispered, his voice shaking. The photographer suspects you. It is not safe.
There was a long, slow exhale, and before I knew it, Yuri had already been pushed aside as a strange shape stepped in. It was a creature. Its long, exaggerated breaths froze my blood as it slowly crept towards me. The animal's face was hideous, its limbs long and emaciated. Its eyes were like glowing embers set in a brown furred face. What on earth is that, I thought? My grandmother's stories were true. It was the Volkolak, in the flesh, and it was so much more haunting than her stories had described. The smell of the creature was horrific. It resembled the scent of rotting meat. I'd encountered it once before while photographing grizzlies in Alaska. I'd come across a moose carcass that had been swarmed by vultures. This was 100 times worse. The Volkolak slowly leaned itself over me and reached for my blanket with a long and serrated claw. It looked like the paw of a wolf, but it was more dexterous and human-like. The stories are real, I thought, nearly fainting. All those legends that they used to scare children had actually happened. And all those victims? They had actually died. And I was next. I waited until the creature's face was directly above me. I kept my eyes sealed shut. I wouldn't dare open them and risk being caught. I couldn't hear Yuri anymore, but at this point I didn't care. All that mattered was survive. I bolted upright and swung the camera in front of my face. My speed light was mounted on top of my camera and aimed directly at the creature. I'd moved so fast that I'd surprised myself and the Volkolak. I snapped the picture. A bright light filled the room, blinding my opponents. The creature stumbled back, nearly bowling over the flames. "Come on!" I snapped another picture. The Volkolak screeched out and rubbed its eyes, trying to get the stars out of its vision. Yuri thrashed in the corner, covering his face and stumbling into the oven, a pot of cold water splashing onto his body.
"Ah! You stupid bastard! What are you doing?"
he screamed. I waited until the Volkolak was directly in front of the fire and aimed my camera again. This was my last chance. If my strategy didn't work, I'd be as good as dead. I took my final picture. This time, the Volkolak roared as it fell into the flames. I leapt back behind my cot as the beast thrashed in agony, making ungodly screams. Yuri leapt forward, scrambling, trying to save his monster from the conflagration.
"Here, my master. I'll save you."
In the monster's frantic movements, one of its monstrous talons swept across Yuri's stomach. The hermit screamed and fell to his knees, trying to hold in his intestines as they spilled out. I shielded myself as the Volkolak stood, charred fur covering its entire body. It looked at me, then bolted outside, nearly caving in the entire cottage as it fled. Its heavy footfalls landed in the snow, distant trees splintered. An ancient cry went up in the darkness and nearly emptied my bladder. I listened to its cries grow faint, then fall silent. I can't tell you how long I hid in Yuri's cabin, waiting to make sure that thing wouldn't come back. A few hours later, it did. I heard the Volkolak's enraged, labored breaths as it circled the cottage, its loud, heavy footfalls crushing the snow. The entire time, I huddled in the corner with one of Yuri's knives, shaking as I sat next to the fire. I couldn't figure out why the beast wasn't coming in. At one point, the Volkolak's face appeared at the door, its glowing eyes focused on me through the narrow opening. It whispered something, then thrashed about as it went away. I glanced at Yuri's corpse and realized the cottage isn't his anymore, and he's dead. The Volkolak has to be invited in. Grandmother had never told me that part. It added a new depth to our stories. It meant that all those people who had perished, they'd been sacrificed by someone, probably a family member or friend in their own village. It made the horror of her tales even worse. At some point, due to exhaustion, I fell asleep. In the morning, I packed my things and prepared for the 3-hour journey back to the town. The truth that Yuri had been offering me to this beast as a nightly meal was reinforced after I'd poked around his cottage and found a small hatched door beneath his table. After I opened it, I discovered hundreds of wallets and passports, jewelry and other valuables from travelers who'd made their journey out here and never returned. Each a victim who had been desperate to put a face to the legends and paid the price. I took what evidence I could carry and began the long hike back to the village. I was so exhausted, but I had to make it home. I had to tell everyone about the monster I'd seen. I've been in the village for almost 3 hours now. I've alerted the authorities, but the nearest police station is 6 hours away. I'm going to compile all the evidence now so that when they get here, I can explain everything. When I get home, I'm going to prove to everyone that my grandmother's stories were real, and that the Volkolak is more than just a legend. Most heartfelt greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed this production from Dusklight Radio and the premiere of Season 7. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out some of our other transmissions. We are adding them regularly, and we'd love to have you as part of the Dusklight family by subscribing, hitting the bell of light, and Dusklight. Leave a comment for any stories you would love our many-legged runners to find. This has been an audio production of Dusklight Radio. All music you have heard has been provided by Epidemic Sound. Rigging and background work was provided by SirGorke. Editing was provided by We Try Horror and TJ Lee. Voice work was provided by TJ Lee, Spirit Voices, and the Dark Somnium with gracious thanks. All assets are owned by Dusklight Radio. Dusklight Radio's Season 7 theme was composed by John Moore. You could find more from John linked to the description below. I want to thank all of our patrons for making this possible. If you want to sign up, it's as little as $1 a month and you get exclusive content, early access videos and stories, updates, and more. But times are tough and we will always be grateful for support no matter what form it comes in. Financial, spiritual, corporeal, maniacal, whatever you want. It really helps us out. Dusklight gives thanks to Isaiah Thomas, Devon Weems, A-Rod Coe, Todd Hawes, Kian Colburn, Larry W., PRDL12, Jimmy Ricardo, Jack the Lad, J.I. Lara, Val Was Taken, Amy Walrath, Heather G., Dexter, Super Abyss, Morgan Ra, Dave L., Boguslaw Smalek, Goth Mommy 666, Someone Somewhere, Anj, M., Courtney Whirl, Kissy Dawn, Maddie, Kessler, Jose Ortega, Mickey Klaus, Dog River 17, Mel H, Satanist Bambi, Battered Names, Ashwolf Grey, Imani Boo, Reclusive, and Torin. Our Purple Crayon Eaters, New Recruit Dreadful Raven, E, Feeny Von Karma, Max, Phi, Ashabel, Alex, Gail Allstott, Echo Kane, Ian Hancocks, Okami-san, Orphan Nuka, Calcully Zero, Christian Hatting, Amba Singh, Darkness Within, Paul J. DeSena, Justy Blue, Desert Bluffs, PV69, Sutters, Oliver Yourface, Camila Roja, Rory Shamba, Becky Sineni, Aiden, Emma, Kid Kiriyama, Creature Creations, Emily McMullen, and Smig. Our janitors, new member Obese, Ebla Nation Z, Nordic Hero, Alex Nunez, Arkham Cookie, Amy, Adrian R, Heather Cayley, Scott, Death 31, Sabiel Eclipse, Joy Flint Healy, Ducks, Shane Lewis, DJ Muffin, Odd Nightborn, Alec Hansen, Oliver Topalook Natale, Kenza, Darktail, Brianna Elliott, Rosari Cardwell, Ryan Moore, Raspberry Pie, Mima, Isabel Vladislaus, Marcus Hoyer, and Ali. Our Nightmare Detectives, Jake Bullock, Fox Clifford, Mike, Melanie Schaefer, Mothman, Mama Chewy, Halo Davis, and Kikuhime 1202. Our Void Walkers, Professor Creepypasta, Rat Squatch, and Domine Silvers. And lastly, our Blackwell family members. New arrivals Toby, Michael, and Angie Blackwell, Great Uncle Vin Blackwell, the towering, chittering forest shaman, Koshka and Fly J, the terrifying twosome with a hell of a voice despite a skull for a head, Fenric Blackwell with the Garden of Eden in one hand and the life-taking scythe in the other, still with a beating heart, Sabrina Blackwell, the crotcheting protector, Bigums Blackwell, the swollest of them all, Olivia Blackwell, future playwright and thespian, Izzy Blackwell, our bug commander, TJ Blackwell, the ultimate opportunist and identity thief, Delera Blackwell, the pestilence protector and plague doctor of Battenberg, Adela Blackwell and her firemancy, innuendo, and illusions, Ethan Blackwell risking it all for esoteric artifacts in the ire of our family, Aphrodite and Wojak Blackwell, Master Armorer, Gunsmith, and Funeral Director Ashton Blackwell, writing a sonnet over his latest gun, Jackal Blackwell, don't ask what's inside the sushi, Clue Blackwell, always lurking in the corner of your eye, Tabitha Blackwell, second in swollenness, first in mining for legendary ore, and forever frenemy, to our last entrant, Papa Kyle Blackwell, coated in 3 layers of bone armor and ready to defend what he deems as rightfully his. We love and fear you, Papa. We thank you humbly for your patronage and look to see you bright and early for Dusklight orientation. Purple crayons and existential dread will be provided. And one last time, listeners, close your eyes and breathe with me. Remember, no matter how bad things are, how cruel people can be, and how heavy your shoulders may feel with the weight of the world bearing down on them, Dusklight will always be here to lift the load and provide you with some respite. Drink some passion fruit J2O, watch a video essay on your favorite old school cartoon, and sleep on the cool side of the pillow with the window open and the stars twinkling down on you. Start and end each day with kindness in your heart. You matter, you are loved, and every day is another chance. I'll see you again when the sun sets and dusk enters the station.